What's up, everybody? Thanks for being here. I've got a special guest today. Doug and I were actually having a pretty long conversation before we went live, what we are or not going to talk about. Doug Logan, good friend of mine. We've known each other for how long now? A few years.
I think around 5 or 6, somewhere around there.
And kind of an interesting way of meeting each other was through I think didn't we have some sort of like a little disagreement on LinkedIn about something? I can't remember exactly what it was. Something about cybersecurity.
Whatever. It's possible.
Yeah.
Didn't I meet you at a speaking event though? I did something locally.
I think that was after the fact.
Was it?
Yeah, but there was something I think I had commented on related to what you do, and then from an insurance perspective, from the technology standpoint, and it wasn't a big deal. But then we ended up having lunch and found out we have a lot more in common, and went from there. And then yes, what you're really known for is when you made that one phone call to me and told me what you were about to do.
Pretty much. You tried to talk me out of it. Do you remember?
I did. I do remember. Yeah, I'm like, are you sure?
Maybe I should have listened to you.
Are you sure you want to do this, Doug? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out, but you had a good reason for it, and I feel bad knowing you personally with what you're going through, and you and I have talked about even before any of this stuff happening, is to get together, do a podcast and all that kind of stuff. And we just kept putting it off. And I guess maybe this was the reason that, we're finally together on this, but, what really, and I'm not going to get in. I watched the other podcast that you did. You had explained it to me. It's about 3 hours long, and you guys really do get into the weeds, and I'm not going to do that. And one thing I want to preface this with is, I'm not going to, and I know you're not, is to profess winners and losers, this and that, not get into that kind of stuff, because, not only do we not want to get shut down on YouTube, but at the same time, I think there are people that are hyperbolic on both sides, and speaking in absolutes on both sides, and that's not something that we want to do. I think just kind of discuss it, not in extreme detail, but kind of go through, what you were doing, why what you found, and that kind of stuff. So why don't you kind of introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody, what it is that you do and what your background is and that kind of stuff.
Leave it super open-ended. I am so bad at this stuff. So I'm probably most infamous right now for being the former CEO of Cyber Ninjas. And we did run the Maricopa County election audit, forensic audit, that was run over this last summer. Prior to that, we primarily focused in the application security field, which means that we find vulnerabilities in software and we work with developers to get it resolved. And so that's through ethical hacking, that's through code review. And I guess a little over a year ago, after the election, I was texting a friend of mine, and we were kind of sharing stories back and forth about that weird spike in the middle of the night and just other anomalies just didn't make any sense to us. And she asked me, she said, if I can find out who's working on this election integrity thing, Doug, will you look into it and get to the bottom of this? Because it doesn't look right. And I trust you with your honesty and your integrity to get to the bottom of what happened. I said, sure. Whatever. If you find out who's working on it, I'll go take a look at it. And I was thinking like a week or two, something like that. So about a week later, she calls me up. She said she found someone who's going to Lynn Wood's house in order to work on election integrity stuff, and wanted to know if I wanted to go. I met up with him and I went there. I'd never heard of Lynn Wood. I didn't know anything that was going on. I just went there to try to, serve our country and to get to the bottom of it. And I spent a lot of time there trying to get forensic images of these various different photo machines so we could drill into what was going on with them, and really fielding a lot of questions from individuals and information and trying to vet information across the board. that ultimately ended up with me being involved in the Antrim County case, where I did a Cyber Ninjas report showing that the election equipment there is extremely vulnerable and is poorly written software. If you want to come take a look at the Cyber Ninjas report, I encourage you to go to mattdeperno.law.com and look at the expert reports. There's a lot of great information there. I encourage you in all this stuff, as there's so much misinformation, disinformation out there, and there's been so much things said about me. That you would go to primary sources. Look at what I actually said.
Yeah, that's one of the things, that kind of blew my mind immediately after you had told me what you were going to do, and I, of course, tried to talk you out of it, but immediately, the news reports were attacking you immediately, and that's when when you hear these stories about when people complain about the media and the mainstream media and things like that. This was a perfect example from a personal standpoint that I knew who you were, and the attacks were not only coming from local Arizona newspapers immediately without really knowing anything about you, but it also came from, Anderson Cooper on CNN, just like major networks that people. Rachel Maddow. Name the typical a-holes that are in the mainstream media that immediately just attacked instead of saying, well, let's figure out what this guy's doing. The first one I love was, well, he doesn't have any experience in an election, auditing or whatever it was. And from my understanding, it was more that really wasn't what it was about. It was more doing what it is that you are good at, which is figuring out software, ethical hacking, that kind of stuff is what you were really hired to do. And again,
and I was an accounting degree once upon a time. I've been involved in some FISMA audits. I've been involved in various audits associated with public traded companies, and it's, I haven't been running those before. But my goal when we did the audit out there was to bring in all the expertise that we needed. And like Cypher, I mean, they're the ones that identified the Office of Personal Management breach that existed for like 3 years. When all of the applications for clearance had been stolen, they came in to do a demo of their software and identified something that had been there for 3 years, which is really impressive. And so that's why we brought them in, because it's likely that if anything did manipulate voting machines, nation states would have an interest to do so. So having some of the nation state experience is important.
Yeah. So in other words, you brought in other experts along to work along with you. It wasn't just you that was doing it. And again, we're not saying, by talking about this, that talking about, anything was stolen, any of that kind of stuff. We're not saying any of that, but just like anyone would hire you to come in and say, hey, can you find any vulnerabilities that might in the future, present or in the future, might cause issues? Can you figure that stuff out for us so we don't have a problem? And so, the criticism that you took was just kind of mind blowing. And
15 minutes from when the contract was awarded, there was already a hit piece article out about me and my company.
Yeah. Not even knowing what you were going to find. And, and then on top of it, then, once everything is pretty much done, and I'm not well versed in all of this. There's a lot of detail. Like I said, I didn't watch the entire hearing and all that. All I really saw is and we were reading a comment before. See, look what happened. Doug found that Biden won, even by more votes. And the thing is of course it's going to happen, because if you're taking the same ballots that you had before and you count them all up, that's to be expected. So again, it wasn't really about that. It was more along the lines of, these other things that you were looking into. But
and that's the thing, is the whole narrative early on was that I was a biased political hack in there to change the results to say that Trump won.
Right.
And like, if I was trying to manipulate the results, don't you think I'd make it the other way slightly?
Right.
I mean, no. Yeah. I mean, I have a reputation throughout my entire life of honesty and integrity. People know me for that, for doing the right thing for the right reasons. And we approached it that way. During the audit, we ran a training class for every new person we brought in. that ran about 2 or 3 times a day. And I hit probably 70, 80% of those trainings. And I told everyone that, we're looking for whatever the truth is. We want you to act beyond reproach. It's a biblical concept. We want to make sure that you don't even look like you're doing anything wrong. So think about it, because when you're out there on this, out in front of live stream 24/7, you're on a stage. And if you start tearing up paper or whatever, it's going to look bad. And our goal is to figure out what is real, and only that. And I made sure everyone knew that. So every one of the over 1,500 people that worked on the audit understood that we were there simply to uncover what happened, to find any problems, and to make sure that from a legislative reform standpoint, it was dealt with, so people have confidence with elections going forward.
Yeah, and then actually we have a comment. This Daniel Hilton, with all the videos showing fraudulent behavior by poll workers, why aren't there more charges being filed? That's not your job. I mean, you're basically, your job was to go in and say, hey, this is what I found. You turn it over to the authorities, and the authorities are the ones that are, the AG's office is the one that's supposed to go out and handle this and do the investigation. Because once again, you're not making any claims. You're just saying, this is what I found. If you guys want to investigate it, go investigate it. But that's for law enforcement. That's for the Attorney General's office to investigate.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to recognize that we have 3 branches of government and checks and balances for a reason. And in today's day and age, that's getting blurred like crazy. When we were brought into the Arizona Senate, we were hired by the Arizona Senate. We were serving a legislative purpose. That was our goal. If we uncovered any problems, this was not a recount where our stuff was automatically binding and changed results. That's not what it was. Our stuff was a legislative reform. No matter what we found, it had to be taken on by another branch of government for anything to happen with it, which would be the Attorney General's office, which is the executive branch. And that's by design. Our checks and balances, our Constitution are there for a reason. And so we wanted to help that legislative reform. And we've been able to be involved in some of the legislation that's been submitted forward to make things better, because no matter how good things are, they can always make them better. That's why you do audits. That's why every publicly traded company goes through an audit every single year, because it makes them better.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the purpose, of having an audit, like you said, an accounting audit, an accounting firm to go in and audit a company's books to make sure everything's on the up and up. I think the problem is that immediately the left painted you as supporting, one particular side, and that everything that you were going to do was going to be biased, and that just simply wasn't the case. Immediately before you even started.
Mark Elias hired 70 attorneys to try to shut down our audit. The fact that he was not successful is an indication we were doing things right, because if there was even the smallest reason to, they would have. And I think we've shown that the courts were not really in favor of us in general. So if they had an excuse to shut us down, they would have.
Yeah. And why don't you talk a little bit about how, after all of this was, now that the dust really hasn't settled, but some time has gone by. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you were treated by the right?
Okay. So, I mean, our country is really divided, and everyone wants to say right now that it's just one little line. You have the right and you have the left. But that's absolutely not the case. Those who are conservative on the right-hand side, there's a lot of disagreement. And I spent a lot of my time during the audit responding to legal stuff to make sure we didn't get shut down, but also trying to work on conflicts in between the various different groups that supported the work that we're doing. And of course, during and after the audit, there's been all sorts of conspiracy theories that, are, from the right that, I'm some deep state guy. I purposely threw the audit. I should have found even more than I did find. And I just want to be clear. I know that we had some comment earlier. Well, if there's video of poll workers doing X, Y, Z, why aren't people in jail? So that is an excellent question. That's really for the executive branch. But also more specifically, I want to talk about from our audit standpoint. We knew that it was very, very important that we did everything with integrity and with solid facts behind it. Because what's the one thing that you've heard over every election integrity thing over the last year? There is absolutely no evidence to support that there was any problems in the election. No evidence, right? That's the wording that has been said. There's no evidence. It's all been disproven. It's all been whatever. And so we wanted to make sure that when we did an audit report, that everything was 100% backed up with facts. So everything that's in our audit report, we say, here's this sample set of data that came off of. And this is what we did our analysis on. And specifically, this is how we went about it. And we have all the facts to back up everything. If we made any mistake, and that's everything from where they say that there wasn't internet connectivity, we actually said, we utilized this tool on this server in this way, and this is what we saw. And that was in our rebuttal. So if we did anything wrong, all you have to say is that tool doesn't do that. We gave every bit of hard evidence to back up everything we said. And the responses from us have been all political theater and trying to discredit us. And did I answer your question? I apologize. I got a little off track.
Yeah, well, I think you pretty much answered it, but it's like it is all political theater essentially, in a nutshell, where you immediately are attacked by the left as a partisan hack, and that you were hired to try and change the results, which wasn't the case. And then on the right, they're all angry at you because
I didn't go far enough.
You didn't go far enough. I mean, meanwhile, all you're doing is saying, okay, you guys want me to do this. All right, I'm in there. I'm doing it. Here's my report. And everybody gets pissed off at you anyway from both sides. And you're just trying to do the right thing. You're just trying.
Meanwhile, my family and I have gotten death threats. Yeah. Individuals in my company have gotten death threats. We've had people on the property. I lost my company. I'm in severe debt. I'm canceled. We can talk more about that.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the other thing I was going to kind of touch on and ask you about is what kind of, what kind of toll is it, put on you from your family and everything else on, on taking on, this project that's, it's been seemingly based on what you've been talking about. It's really turned into a nightmare.
Yeah, we have ongoing lawsuits related with public records, and I don't know how much detail you want to go into that. But I'm going to over summarize it and say that effectively they're saying because I did an audit, that my text messages with my wife in the middle of the audit, if they had to do with anything with the audit, may in fact now be public records. And that's just, the extreme interpretation of what the judge has been saying. And I can go in more detail. It's been ridiculous. Justice is supposed to be blind. I've had multiple attorneys basically tell me, there's the law and then there's the law for you, Doug Logan. That's the only way I can explain this is there's a new interpretation of the law specifically for you in order to make this stuff happen. And that's not what our country was built on. That just kind of gets to you. You're like, but justice for all, black,
right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just you. It's, what's happening with January 6th, what happened in Ottawa. We had a long conversation last night, which we had recorded.
that was an epic conversation.
It was. But, you're just one of those people that, that's gotten caught up in this cancel culture thing and the system of justice where, we've heard about it a lot from others, how there's one set of rules for one group of people and another set of rules for another group of people. And we just can't have a functioning society if that just continues on the way it's going. Just what, the stories that you've told me and, what you're going through just to try to do the right thing is really, it's sad. It's really sad. I know you're going to be battling this for quite a while, but, I feel bad for you. I really do, but,
God's still in control. It's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. And that's what you have to believe in that. And that's another thing. A lot of people don't believe in God anymore. And that's really put us down the wrong path as well.
I saw an awesome t-shirt the other day. It showed the United States with a Band-Aid in between the two of them. And it said, our country is really divided right now, but I'm really glad I'm on the side that believes in God, has most of the weapons, and understands what restroom to use.
There you go.
It cracked me up.
Well, what do you? I mean, we can get off this subject, but where do you go from here? What's next? What's next for you? What do you think? What do you think's going to happen?
I really don't know right now. I mean, you of course know this, but a lot of people didn't know this. But give a little bit of history. So Cyber Ninjas, I ran the company for 8.5 years, profitable company. At its peak, I was employing about 8 people, which was roughly before the audit. Over the course of the audit, I lost most of my employees, some from natural attrition, some who didn't agree with what we were doing, and some that just got afraid that something was going to happen to the company. And they weren't wrong. Ultimately, because of the audit work, we acquired a massive amount of debt to subcontractors because the fundraising efforts were not greater than what the costs were. And I think you told me earlier there's some comment about who won't talk about the funds. Go to my website, cyberninjas.com. Okay, you'll see a full breakdown of all the funds as of September 15th. And as soon as I have enough of pause in a life to get up on my accounting stuff, I'll have it fully updated. You'll know exactly where everything was spent. The fact of the matter is audits are expensive, and start looking back at some of the recounts where they literally just counted ballots and we did way more, and look at the numbers associated with the cost of those, and you'll find that what we spent is not that ridiculous. Yeah. In fact, it's a bargain for what we got done, especially with the forensics that we did as well. But in any case, so Cyber Ninjas, the Arizona Senate decided not to pay us. Mm-hmm. Our contract with them had an indemnity clause in it that stated that if we were sued related to our work, that they would actually reimburse us. In fact, they were originally an original contract that took out all indemnity, and I was ready to walk out on the deal. And Senator Fan said, "No, I understand. We need, you need to be something in there for you, because, you're just a small company." In any case, we've decided not to indemnify us, not to pay us back on any of that stuff. And so the ongoing legal expenses, when I got confirmation that they were not planning on paying me, they weren't sure if at all, or certainly not anytime soon, I had to make the decision in early December to shut down Cyber Ninjas. So because I wanted to make sure on that last payroll that I could pay out everyone's vacation time and fully pay them. There's too many questions, and the cash flow, I already wasn't paying my attorney. My attorney was ready to withdraw. He was filing paperwork to withdraw on that from non-payment. And so I just wanted to make sure that I could do that. So we closed Cyber Ninjas. I wanted to make sure my employees and my biggest customers were taken care of. So I started a new company. I took out a loan to start that company, and I hired a lot of my other employees, to make sure that they weren't impacted. Because from my point of view, I had made a risky decision being part of this audit. That entire time, they pretty much hadn't worked on any of the audit stuff. They've been all working on regular work. So we were able to bring over one of our major customers. But what I found was that most of my other customers wouldn't call me back. They didn't want anything associated with me. I was canceled now. Tried to get insurance. How many carriers did you put us in front of? What did you say, 60, 70 carriers?
Yeah, as many as we possibly could. And yeah, I mean, when they Google your name, they don't want to have any part of it themselves.
So without errors and emissions insurance, I was looking like I can't have contracts without that. I was losing money because I couldn't keep enough of my employees billable. We weren't having anyone applying for our jobs when we're trying to put our job stuff out there. And so that got my attention, and, my faith is important to me. So I got on my knees and I prayed, and I felt like the Lord said, your insurance is going to come through, but you need to close your shop. So I told everyone that Monday that, we're going to close at the end of the month, which was the end of, a short contract that we had. That's actually the end of this month. And sure enough, that day, Dennis reaches out to me. I found insurance for you. And I was like, that's exactly what the Lord told me was going to happen. Yeah. But we're going to continue with this. So I'm shutting all of it down. I lost money. I'm going to owe more money than what I took out to start the company. And for those of you who don't know, if you have a company that's in bad financial shape, you can't just take any assets out of it and move to another. It's called what's called a fraudulent transfer. And when you hit bankruptcy, it's a big deal. It's not quite the same thing as like fraud, but you have to undo it. And so when I started my new company, I didn't start it with any assets of the old company. Those things that I did transfer, which were a few computers I bought from that new company. And so literally I had to have a loan in it. I didn't take any of that money over and loan it. And again, we're losing money. So it's shut down. I've got more money I got to pay back, but I don't know what I'm doing for a job, at the end of this week. I don't know how I'm going to earn an income. I don't know what the Lord has planned. But that's, just more about where I'm at. And that's, that's not information that you have anywhere else. This is the first time I've talked about that stuff.
Yeah. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because I mean, it's a personal thing. It's not easy to talk about, I'm sure, but it's the the price that you are paying right now for trying to do the right thing. And it's also a shame that it seems to me like the Arizona Senate just left you out to dry.
At the end of the day, I can sleep well at night knowing that I did everything I said I was going to do. And I'm hopeful that, it bothers them. It should.
Yeah. But it's
I don't understand it. I'm sure there's some logic behind it, but I've ceased trying to understand political decisions. There's just, you can't rationalize it.
I guess not. And you would think that they would stand behind you and help you out. And it's a shame. And that's what's demoralizing to me is, hearing that story. You really can't trust either party. And that's where I think at some point, in order for us to fix this, we need a third party. There needs to be, especially with, when I'm looking at what was going on in Ottawa, and I didn't really know that much about Canadian politics, but I found it fascinating how many different parties there were. Now, the vast majority of them are, you have the outright liberals, and then you have, I guess, different factions, and, people will correct me, with different factions of the Liberal Party, and the Conservatives are obviously a minority, but at least they have different parties that, within Canadian politics. We are stuck with the two. And if neither one of them is willing to, to help the people and work with the people and make it about, the citizens of the United States, and what kind of hope do we even have?
Or hope has to be in Jesus, but anyway.
Yeah.
But on that note, I mean, I think that in general, we're finding that the larger any entity is, the more difficult it is for it to do what is right. I mean, we've got big tech that's coordinating with the government in order to shut down freedom of speech. And we've got, big parties, in order to control things. But there are good politicians out there. There are people standing for what's right. I mean, one of the big ones is, I absolutely love Wendy Rogers. Wendy Rogers is an amazing individual, and I actually disagree with her on a lot of topics, but she's 100% genuine in what she believes in. She stays steadfast in what she believes in. And the thing is, as voters, we've got to start voting for those candidates. We may not agree with them on every last little topic. There's things that Wendy says at times. I'm like, really, Wendy? I was like, but you're consistent. And like, I know that you're actually saying what you believe. You're not telling me one thing one day and then changing it the next day. And she doesn't compromise. And there's other examples of people out there. I think that, honestly, that's one of the reasons why people like Trump, because he was genuine. You may not agree with all his policies. You may not agree with everything he said, but you knew exactly where he stood, and he was genuine on everything.
Well, I like to equate it to the thing that Donald Trump did was because he was never really a politician.
Yeah.
Was he turned over the rock, and that's, you could see all the cockroaches start running around. And that's what really wasn't for him, we wouldn't see, unfortunately we have a more divided left and right than we ever have before. But I think that started with the 2000 election with Bush and Gore. I think that's when that really started to take place. But love him or hate him, with Trump, he did expose a lot of what was going on in politics, for sure. And
one of the things I really loved about Trump is he made it okay to love our country again. When I was younger, before Trump, there's this idea that somehow, America wasn't worthy, to be loved. And the reality of it is that we are not perfect. In fact, that's why it says we, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, because it's not perfect. But, we are a light upon a hill, and he made it okay to love our country. And by all means, part of loving your country is correcting and growing it and making it better. But I think that's why he revitalized such a grassroots, because it was almost like every single day we were supposed to be ashamed of who we were,
Right.
and all in many different categories, ashamed of who we are. And he made it okay, to be American, okay to love our country, okay to love God, versus trying to hide on that. And that's priceless.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's very well said. I do want to put a comment up here. Stacy, unfortunately, they're just different sides of the same snake. I guess I kind of agree with that. Like you said, not everybody, but.
Yeah, and I do and I don't. I mean, I think that, one thing that I learned in the Arizona audit is I learned what it's like to be in the middle of a huge political thing. Everybody was trying to make me look bad, other people trying to make me look good. And the life that politicians have is hard. Okay. You do the smallest thing and they try to blow it into proportions, or they literally fabricate information. I mean, I never knew how fake news was until I was the subject of their conversations. I'm like, no, that's not what happened yesterday. You're like, nowhere close. So being a politician and walking that and staying steadfast is difficult. And the reality of it is that most people don't have the spine to do it with integrity. It's hard to do anyway. And most people just don't have the spine to do it with integrity. And those that do, most of them don't want anything to do with politics.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think you sort of have to be somewhat of a sociopath to be a politician. Because you have to have such a thick skin to be able to take the criticism that a lot of people don't want to take that kind of criticism. And then the first time somebody lies about them or makes up something about them, it's probably devastating to them. And they're like, well, why do I want to be bothered doing this? So as a result, we get, the sociopaths that don't care what people say about them. And in some cases that might be a good thing. But at the same time have no problem doing things that aren't good because of that kind of sociopathic behavior. And so it just doesn't seem to, we just don't have a lot of good people in politics. And I think they're all scared to do it. Like you said.
I think there's a new group coming in. And we're starting to see it. We're starting to see more and more people who are like, I never wanted to be a politician, but something has to be done and someone needs to do it. And I'm willing to do it. And that's how I ended the audit. I was like, our country is in bad shape. When 47% of Americans believe an election is rigged, it doesn't even matter if it's real. Our country's going to fail. Okay. Yeah. So the way you handle that is with transparency. How do you have transparency? You have audits. So if no one else is willing to put their name forward, by all means, I'll put my name forward. Let's get it done. It's for the country. It's important. And we need more people willing to do that. You know what? I really don't want to be a politician, but by golly, all our candidates, all the choices out there aren't a good option.
Right.
So let's go get it done.
Let's do something. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll stop talking about that. And we'll go into what we were talking about last night, because I do want to talk about this. You sent me an article.
And we have to talk about Shattuck at one point. I put out a blast to my Telegram saying that we would. And I know we have Arizonans on right now going, are you going to talk about the Shattuck report? So at some point, doesn't have to be this moment.
Let's do it right now, because I do have it pulled up.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding me.
Can you show up page 2?
Yep.
Because I think most of the highlights we can talk about just in looking at page 2, but we can drill into more details on it. So it all depends. Like we'll try to do the abbreviated version of this. And go ahead and make it so the word limited scope is at the top and you go from there down.
How's that?
So I think that the results, so for those of you who don't know, over the course of our audit, we were originally told that we were going to be given access to the routers and Splunk logs. And for those of you who have no idea what Splunk, what is that? Basically, when you have an application running, when certain events happen, it generates logs. Normally those logs will be local on a computer, but it's hard to do analysis on things unless you aggregate that all together. So Splunk is a tool that takes the logs from all these different systems and puts them in one location that makes it really easy to search and do analysis and so forth. So they said that they had Splunk, which is aggregation software that I was amazed about, that had data and information in it. So they were supposed to give this to us so we can do analysis as part of the audit. But they came up with all these crazy reasons as to why this would somehow compromise sheriff data, and we were not trustworthy. So we couldn't have it. Never mind the fact that Cypher, who do the analysis, has clearance, and so do I. But in any case, we're not trustworthy to look at sheriff data, and therefore they couldn't turn it over. So the Senate's answer to that was to put together a settlement at the end with Maricopa County, and in that settlement, they agreed to have what's called a special master, which is basically a legal guy, a guy that's a third party to look into things with the routers, and he hired 3 IT people to try to drill into things. Now, I personally think that settlement was a really, really bad idea. There's a lot of bad stuff in it that makes it not possible to really get to the bottom of this. And we'll explain that really quickly how that's what happened, because I was hoping for the best here, but I think at the end of the day, we ended up with political theater rather than anything that's useful. Now, first of all, if you take a look at the limited scope, you'll notice that the limits of their inquiry were just looking at the county's routers and Splunk logs related to November 3rd general election. So they weren't looking at the actual systems, the actual computers. They weren't looking on that computers. They were only looking at what they could find routers or what they were found in Splunk logs. And the most limiting factor here right now is right there. The period of inquiry was from October 7th through November 20th, 2020. Okay. So they only looked directly around the election. And I'm going to explain why that's really significant. We'll jump straight into number 3. And because this is one that's posted in mind. You see number 3 down below, they had 3 things they're trying to do. So that next paragraph, the last sentence, whether the router Splunk log contain any evidence or data of deletion, data purging, data overridden, or other descriptive evidence or obstruction of the audit. Okay, so the only thing they looked at in this entire time was October 7th through November 20th. Anything outside of that, they didn't look at that. Based on our audit report, there was deletion of data, there was purging of data, there was overwriting of data, there was destruction of data, and in doing so, there was obstruction of the audit. But everything that happened in that regard were all after November 20th. So over the scope of the way this looked like, by default, even if they had all the data they needed to the analysis, even if they were fully qualified in what they're doing, even if everything across the board, it was out of scope for them to answer that question, because everything that we found, and just be clear, if you go back to our audit report, and I think when this is posted up, I'll see if Dennis can put links to the actual document. Our audit report actually says where we found the logs, what was in them, what was the deleted files, all that stuff. So in any case, this data is real. We really think it's deleted, but that was the article. Cyber Ninjas is wrong. The Shattuck report proves them wrong because they said they couldn't find evidence of it. No, if you're trying to look for something that happened in February, March, April, and you're looking at, October, November data, you're not going to see it. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means you didn't look in the right place.
Okay.
So the next thing, let's jump back to the number 1, whether there was any evidence that the routers or managed switches in the election network were connected to public internet. One of the things that Ben Cotton found with Cypher was that there was indications that at one point in time that several of the systems that were on the network, that over the course of the report, what they referred to as the BTC network, that was supposed to be Ballot Tabulation Center network, that was supposed to be fully air gapped, there was indications that they were actually connected to the internet and made some requests. When we had original report, when we had a rebuttal, we actually said, hey, specifically, he ran this tool on this data on these systems, which had these results, and here's information on it. So if they wanted to prove us wrong on that data, all they needed to do was go back to that system and that tool and say that tool doesn't do that, or so forth. But none of that was in scope of this audit. All they had to look in the scope of this audit was the Splunk logs. Now, over the course of this report, they actually, one of their little details in it, and we won't jump to it because it'll take too long, but feel free to read it in details. They mention what data they have in their Splunk. So because Splunk is log aggregation, it doesn't mean it automatically has all the logs that exist on your system. It only has what you gave to it. So it's really significant what type of data was put into it. If you want to know if something was connected to the internet, there were several things we wanted to test. We want to take the MAC addresses, which are unique identifiers, the computers on this supposedly air-gapped network, and see if they show up in NetFlow data, in the Splunk data. NetFlow is basically shows connections, passes of data over time as a way to keep track of it. on this other network that had access to the internet, because if it was truly air gapped, they never would have been. But they never mentioned anywhere in the Splunk data they had NetFlow. So literally, they don't have the NetFlow logs in the first place. So there was no way for them to determine if something was connected to the internet or not. Even if in that time frame, because they didn't have the right type of logs to go through. On top of that, if you start going through and looking at things, they basically say they knew things weren't connected to the internet because they walked through the office and looked with their eyes, and they talked with people there who told them it never happened. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a very good audit if you don't look at evidence. The point of audit is to say, you say this, let me confirm it. You say this, let me confirm it. And if they did confirm it any other way, it's not written in the report, and that makes it, at a bare minimum, a bad report. But it looks like they didn't have enough data in it. One of the other interesting things in here that they mentioned is that there weren't any managed switches or routers. And you might say, well, what's a managed switch? Okay, so you got your home router at your house. When you go and you plug in a new device to it, it automatically assigns an IP address, and that IP address is automatically in the same range. You often can't change those connections. So if it was just a switch that did that action, that's an unmanaged. You can't change it. It's all or nothing in it. You plug into it, that's what it is. A managed switch allows you to do a lot more flexibility. And so from a computer term standpoint, you can create VLANs, which are called virtual networks, basically. So you can have one set of computers that are together, and there's another set of computers that are connected together. Now, generally, you only use VLANs in complicated networks. When you want to have different levels of access, you want to have this computer be able to get to the internet and that one not, and this is production separated from it. So you want to do something really complicated. You only want to run VLANs. Now, when we physically look at these machines, which again, this data is separate, that this was not in scope of things, we found these machines had various different IP ranges associated with them. So there was something, if I recall correctly, on the 192 private IP address space. There was something in 172 private IP space. There's one in the 10 IP space. The fact that they're different numbers really, the fact that what the numbers are really doesn't matter. But the fact of the matter is they are different IP spaces. Now, you cannot do that in a network unless you have a managed switch. That's what managed switches do, is allow you to assign different stuff like that. So the fact we were finding multiple IP spaces, and if it really was only ever connected to the, 20 adjudication machines, 4 EMS workstations, workstation server, a handful of ICC devices, and 4 scanners, like, you don't need to have multiple different IP spaces, all that complexity. It doesn't make any sense for it if that's all it's there. So only if it was connected with other devices, and in which case it's like, what is it connected to? So like the whole everything we found suggested managed switches. And furthermore, we found one single computer that dual booted. So what that means is, like, it had 2 hard drives, and it could say, I don't remember, I think they're both Windows, but let's just say for an illustration, one, it would boot up as Windows and the other one would boot up as Linux. Proof of concept. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So like, if you turn it on and say, I want Windows, it would run from this hard drive. You say, I turn on this, it goes in the other hard drive, but it has the same freaking network card. But when we looked at the configuration of those dual boots, we found that one had one IP address space and the other one had another IP address space. They were not in the same network. And again, same physical computer, same physical location. The only way you could have it dual boot from one IP space to the other is if you had a managed switch. So you absolutely had a managed switch. And the question is, why do you have that complexity in a network that is supposed to be air gapped, that has less than 100 systems on it? It makes no logical sense. And again, this investigation that they looked into things doesn't answer it. It was supposed to answer all these type of questions. They're supposed to get to the bottom as to why that happens. At a bare minimum, even if they couldn't let the Splunk logs, they could have read our report and asked intelligent questions as regards. And the second bullet there is about how the security was. They gave some answers on it. It's not very impressive. I know that We the People Alliance has some very interesting things to say about the way they manage the physical security, even though they say they had 24-hour access and card access and stuff. They found some interesting stuff in that and some of the video footage of things. But one thing I do want to point out about the settlement, which is fascinating and concerning to me, is if you take a look at the actual settlement, and again, the settlement is attached to this document. So when he adds this to the link, I don't know if you've got a way to send a link. I can send you where it is now, Dennis, if you've got a way to blast it out to people. But in any case, if you look at it, the 3 IT specialists that they hired actually have decent credentials. I would have looked for slightly different credentials than what they had, but they're decent. They're reputable things in it. But based on the settlement, they had to sign an NDA that they're not allowed to talk at all. And the only person who's allowed to talk about it is former Congressman John Shattuck that wrote this report. So if those 3 individuals, no matter how qualified they are, and I'm not saying they're not qualified, I think they're actually pretty qualified. If they disagreed with anything in this report, if they even had any input to this report, they're actually not allowed to speak about it. So you would never know. So that's concerning to me, is that there's these bold statements in here, and they say there was no evidence of connection to the internet, no evidence of things deleted. And the reality is, if you read the details of the report, they didn't have the evidence and information they needed to make those analyses. So to summarize, again, it's more political theater versus actually getting down to what happened. And hopefully, I don't know if we got questions, and hopefully that wasn't too technical.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think it is pretty technical. I mean, I understand the routers, I understand the switches, the managed switches, and all that type of stuff. It's probably going to go over a lot of people's heads. Why don't we try to maybe simplify it a little bit more?
The simple answer is they made statements that they couldn't find something, and they didn't have the data they needed to find it. So there's no way they can make statement like even if it was there, what they said wasn't there, they would never have found it. I mean, that's the oversimplification. I gave all the technical reasons as to why.
Right. And it's because of this specific time period that they were looking.
The time period and the information, even if they looked at the time period, the information they're looking for wasn't in the log data based on their own report.
Here's what I don't understand. I'm kind of sort of go off on a separate kind of subject with this, but why, when you talk about air gapped, I mean, I understand what that means is it's not connected to the public internet. A machine shouldn't be plugged in that way. What I don't
understand, air gapped means is that there's no physical cables going to it, and it also implies you don't have any wireless connections either.
Okay.
Like it's literally like you're completely air gapped, and we might say wireless is connection. No, air gapped means literally there are no connections.
Okay. What I don't understand about these voting machines, I guess, is, you remember back in the day when we were in high school and we take tests and they run it through a Scantron machine and it tells you what your grade is.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these machines, at least in Florida, you kind of do the same thing. It's these little, ballots or whatever, and with a little bubble thing, you fill it out and they run it through something that's similar, a Scantron, and it tallies the data. Why does any of that stuff even need to be connected to the internet? Why can't it just tally up whatever the votes are? And I'm sure I'm oversimplifying this and not talking intelligently because I can't talk intelligently about it. But they get the information, it prints out on a piece of paper, it's called into the main office. Here's what our votes are. Everybody agrees that this was correct, and boom, that's it. Why do we have to have managed routers? Or managed switches? Why does any of this stuff even necessary?
I don't think it is necessary. I actually am a firm believer in that. Do you know that in Canada, all federal elections have to be hand counted? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
No, they don't actually allow voting machines. They allow it for local elections for efficiency standpoint, but they don't allow it for any federal elections. So it is possible in order to count things by hand. And I think that it should be done by hand. And here's why. I mean, it's a combination of the fact is that we need to have ownership of our election system, and your average person doesn't understand technology, and they don't understand what's happening with it. And they need to go back to the days where everybody in the neighborhood was involved in the counting. And I'm even a big fan of, why don't we do something like jury duty? You are a registered voter. Because you're a registered voter, you will be called in to help count things. And if you don't want to participate, you've got something going on where you can't, you've got certain excuses you can get it, but otherwise it's your civic duty being part of the counting process. Because I keep saying we don't know how to staff things. But then when accounts go through and stuff comes out and everything, everyone can say, no, I know that count was right because my friend Jimmy was part of that count, and he did that year. Yeah. And that gives the ownership in it. But what I ran into in all this election integrity stuff is you go, hey, we have higher math here that says that there's anomalies here that suggest we should go take a look at this voting system further. And the judge I actually tried to help do criminal search warrant at one point in time, with the working with the sheriff just to do analysis on things. And the judge was, at the end of the day, judges don't understand higher math and they don't understand computer systems. And so when there was already this narrative, there's nothing to see here, higher math computer systems, they say no. And it's very dangerous when we get separated from a system where people don't know and don't trust. And even if it's backwards, and even if it's not as efficient, and even honestly, based on stats, they say it's less accurate, though I think our counting in Maricopa County proved that it doesn't have to be less accurate. But even if all that's true, the fact that individuals have ownership and they see it is what maintains our democracy. Because at the point that someone feels like their voice no longer matters, that's when we break into civil war.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of is that people, because again, we're not, when I started from the beginning of this broadcast, we're not saying one way or another, but they're depending on what people may believe. They may say, "Oh, well, my vote doesn't count," so then they don't go out and vote, and that's not a good thing for our country either. But let me, you have a couple of comments that you were talking about that we might get. It's me says, "Wow, some of you people still believe in this hack. Show the data. Stop hiding." I got another one from the Thomas Edison. Please give us a break. Thomas Edison is in the house. I love these guys.
I said we looked into the systems. We from our analysis.
I just think it's funny. It's just hilarious.
We did not find indications that voting machines had been altered.
Yeah.
That was very clear in our report.
Right.
Now there's a lot of deletion
no one's saying anything
of data.
Yeah. I mean, it's this absolutist, these comments that, and these are just trolls anyway, but I just think it's hilarious to see how, people could just be talking absolutes and not say, hey, can we, like what you were saying before, let's just have more transparency. That's all. No one's saying anything one way or another. No one's saying anything was stolen, this or that or the other thing. None of that can be proven. But there's nothing wrong with asking for more transparency, period.
Yeah.
And for somebody to say, "Oh, well, give me a break. You don't want transparency?" Well, then you have a different agenda. Your agenda isn't for transparency. Your agenda isn't for fair and balanced elections. That's not what you're for. You want it your way, and that's how you want to have it. And that's a sad part.
At the audit, we had John Brakey, who was a progressive Democrat, who actually came and looked at our election stuff, and I think he's unsure about us right now. But while he was there, he was saying, "You guys are doing the right thing the right way, and what you're doing is impressive." Mm-hmm. And he was all for transparency. He has this whole little spiel he goes through, about transparency and all this stuff. And I disagree with him on almost every political topic you can imagine. But we both agree on how elections should be handled because the votes should count how people have counted. And one thing I want to throw out here real quickly is that, I'm probably going to get attacked for this because I'm not radical enough for the radical right. I'm just not. Yeah. But our goal in this audit was to serve a legislative function to help, fix the system to make sure if there was anything found that could be dealt with. I am actually not for the legislators decertifying. I think it's wrong. Mm-hmm. Without an investigation from the executive branch. If you're going to remove a sit-in president, it should require the action of two branches of government. That means that if we do something in a legislative function and we find something interesting, by all means, we pass it over to the executive. But unless they confirm our results, until they confirm our results, there shouldn't be a decertification. You shouldn't be able to remove a president of the United States in any shape or form or even risk it. Without two branches of government, so that was never the goal. But
we're still getting this comment from the Thomas Edison guy, and I'll ignore him after this. But he's like, how many recounts is it going to take until you guys shut up and no, you won't accept you lost? Everybody's accepted it, not everybody, obviously, but it is what it is. And like you just said, this wasn't what it was about on overturning anything. That's not what this was about. And there are things in place in order to do that. So to just blindly say, these, again, hyperbolic things that you're not accepting. It's not about that. It's transparency, improving future deals.
Well, and to that matter, Thomas Edison, have you seen the stuff from True the Vote?
I'm sure he hasn't seen anything, because see, this is when you talk about extremists on one side or the other. At least people in the middle.
Today, go look up True the Vote. They have video footage of individuals who are ballot harvesters walking in front of a ballot box with 10, 20, 30 ballots, taking a photo of it, and then putting them all into it. And this over and over and over again for thousands of votes. So you want to look for your solid proof, go ahead and look at that. Go read our audit report, okay? There's 24,344 mail-in ballots mailed to addresses that people no longer lived at, yet somehow they filled them out and turned them in. Now, that's the Attorney General's job to get to the bottom of that. Maybe there's
Right.
some logical explanation, but it's a pretty big number that doesn't make much sense. So there's stuff in there that needs to be investigated.
But that's but again, that's not your job.
No,
That is law enforcement's job, and that's the AG's office job. That they need to go out and they need to investigate that, and that and that's where people say, okay. And again, it comes back into the elections. If people believe that something needs to be investigated, then you need to pressure law enforcement to go out there and investigate it. But yeah, it's just speaking in absolutes one way or another and that's not how I, want to run this. And again, things should be looked at. There should be more transparency. No one's saying one thing or another. And the investigators have to do the investigation. The AG's office has to do it. That is not your job. That is not, you don't have control over that, I guess is what I'm saying. So,
and I find it really fascinating that if I go to any major event from Ticketmaster and I photocopy my ticket and I walk in with a friend and we try to scan split seconds apart from each other and both get into the event, did you know you'll be denied, immediately? They have the instantaneous real time can deny you, prevent you from getting in from that fraud to happen. And yet when you took a look at Maricopa County, their various records couldn't even reconcile with each other. So the number of people they say showed up to vote didn't match the number of votes cast, and like other basic accounting stuff. And like, there has not been focus on it. So there hasn't been the precision in it, and we need to get better in it. And we can get better in it. And the only way you did it was audits and focus on it. And it's a good thing. This is good for our country, as long as people take it the right way and do it the right way. But when it comes with reasons to attack and cancel people and like not even listen or not even care what facts are anymore, it's all emotionalism. Like it has no value.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And it's just all this emotional stuff. And anyway, Tibor, let me put this one up. Problem, it seems like everyone lost, the whole world. I mean, it seems like that's the direction that we're going into, is that everybody's losing because if you look at some of these comments, it's just it's one side or another. No one can come together and go, hey, we all agree that that things just need to be more transparent, period. That's it. That's not a big deal. That's not a huge thing to ask for. That's not a crazy a crazy thing to require. And again, it's like I'm having trouble even talking about this, because if you do truly speak your mind, or if you do say the wrong thing, you talk about what the whole cancellation thing. And
that's a good leeway, because cancel culture,
it's on its way.
Part of social
it's already
credit,
here. Yeah,
it's part of this. It's equivalent to social credit score at China. I don't know if that's good leading to jump into that topic, but
so yeah, you sent this to me the other day. This is from back in 2018. And I've seen other stories about this, about social credit scores. World Economic Forum's talking about this. You see this stuff on talked about more and more. Not necessarily, well, actually even on more mainstream media stuff, but I won't read through the whole thing, but I'll try and just go through some of the highlight points. But this particular area, China's Shandong province overlooking the Yellow Sea, colorful billboards depicting swans and bank on the birds. One of the city's tourist attractions, returning there every winter to escape the Siberian cold. In an attempt to ease bureaucracy, the city hall, a glass building that resembles a flying saucer, has been fashioned as a one-stop shop for most permits. Instead of driving from one office to another to get their paperwork in order, residents simply cross the gleaming corridors to talk to officials seated at desks in an open space area. One of these stations, Rongcheng residents can pick up their social credit score. In what it calls an attempt to promote trustworthiness in its economy and society, China is experimenting with a social credit system that mixes familiar Western-style credit scores with more expansive and intrusive measures. It includes everything from rankings calculated by online payment providers to scores doled out by neighborhoods or companies. That concerned me. Doled out by neighborhoods or companies. So now your credit score, your social credit score, would be based on not just whether or not you pay your bills on time, which we already have that. You have what's called a credit report, everybody knows. But then if your neighbor has a problem with you, that's going to affect your social credit score. Or a company. This is what struck me, not only the neighbor thing, but companies. So if companies that you do business with, they should be serving you as a customer, but now they get to actually dole out a social credit score.
And this goes on and starts talking about that effectively when fully implemented, and they've started to do this, is that you can't get a loan if you have a low social credit score.
Yeah.
And what's funny is this is actually a pretty positive article about it. Like, it's saying it's a good thing, because they were talking about how, the number of individuals that drive through crosswalks has gone down and people are nicer to their neighbors and all this because now it's gamified in it. But it's also used, if you say anything negative against the government, you get a low score. So people don't even want to talk about things. And this is setting up how the cancel. It's the same thing as cancel culture. It's setting up a mechanism which to control you, where it's not the government that has to do it anymore. It's now everyone in society that's forcing you to do something. And it can be used to control thought, to control actions. And some of those things we may think is a good thing. Like, if it stops people tailgating, that's probably a good thing. But if their tailgating prevents them from being able to take out a loan, or being able to take a train, or being able to go to work, or being able to whatever, it's obviously gone too far, and it puts too much control in the hands of the government that has the ability to just dole this out at a whim.
Mm-hmm. Well, continuing on, that high flyers receive perks such as discounts on heating bills and favorable bank loans, while bad debtors cannot buy high-speed train or plane tickets. By 2020, the government has promised to roll out a national social credit system. I think they've already started doing this, haven't they? Because this is back in 2018, so it's already being put in place. According to the system's founding document released by the State Council in 2014, the scheme would allow the trustworthy to roam everywhere under heaven while making it hard for the discredited to take a single step. But at a time when the Chinese Communist Party is aggressively advancing its presence across town hall offices and company boardrooms, this move has sparked fears that is another step in tightening of China's already scant freedoms. Now, I'd say you can't deny that.
And to go a little bit farther in this, when COVID hit, they actually required everybody to have an app on their phone that identifies where they are. And one of the more recent apps they have, you can open it up and it will physically tell you on the map the names and photos of individuals that are in debt who haven't paid people back for public shaming. So literally, you're walking down the street, that person hasn't paid their bills. And it's, that's something they've implemented.
Wow. But it's been hard to distinguish future promises or threats from the realities of how social credit is being implemented. Rongcheng is one place where that future is visible. 36 pilot systems have been rolled out in cities across the country, and Rongcheng is one of them. According to Chinese officials and researchers, it's the best example of the system working as intended, but it also illustrates those intentions may not be as straightforward as they like to claim. This is what we talked about. I brought up yesterday. The system is a brainchild of City Hall staff, says He Junning, the deputy director of the Rongcheng Social Credit Management Office. The bureaucrat, wearing square glasses and a black checkered sweater, shares the social credit department with 7 other employees on the second floor of the City Hall. The system they have devised assigns 1,000 points at the beginning of each of Rongcheng's 740,000 adult residents. From there, the math begins. Now, here's the most important thing that stuck out to me. The bureaucrat. This is who's going to be controlling it. So typically, most bureaucrats that I come into contact with are people that I would never want to do business with, probably wouldn't be friends with. And these are the people that are going to be determining what your social credit score is going to be, as a bureaucrat, a government bureaucrat. I don't need to hear any more to know that this isn't going to be a good idea. I don't, everything the way it is right now, if you don't pay your bills, your credit score says so, and then financial institutions make their decisions based on that.
And
But
for those of you who go, but in the United States, cancel culture is different. There's some answers to that, and there's some that aren't. Do you know that organizations like Twitter have given a phone number for government agencies to call them to help resolve issues? And that specifically, I think Dr. Shiva in one of his court cases discovered that they actually had utilized that phone number to get some of his tweets banned. We talk about the importance of freedom of speech and how it's different if it's a private organization versus if it's the government. But when the government is calling the private organization, telling them what to do, you have the same coordination that you're seeing here from the social credit score, where you have the coordination between the private sector and the government to help enforce behavior.
Yep.
There's also, I can also tell you that people in the election integrity movement, one individual in particular I know was kicked out of 2 major banks because of the work she was doing in election integrity space. She tried with another 3 or 4 other banks, and they wouldn't take her as a client simply because of her political views. And she had to go to a local bank, and a lot of election integrity people bank at local banks that don't have that influence and control. And you go, why is it that they won't allow that anymore? And it's because in the financial services space, this is already starting to be implemented.
Yeah. So in other words, what this isn't about making society better. That's not what any of this is about. And that's not, the purpose of this. The purpose of this, and just like those who want to implement the same thing in the United States, is control.
It's a gamification of control.
Mm-hmm. So if you don't agree with a certain ideology, you will not be able to bank. You will not be able to use your credit card. You won't be able to do these certain things. I think I got to pull up the article. We can talk about it next week, but one of the major credit card companies has a concept credit card, and that credit card, if your spending habits on that credit card have too high of a carbon, number or whatever it is, it shuts the card off and you can't use it anymore. And again, we were talking about this, how many credit card companies are there that you can use? I mean, you've got MasterCard, Visa, Discover, who barely uses, and then Amex. It was mentioned Diners Club, but you said they're
part of Discover.
They're part of Discover now. Yeah. So again, you don't have many of those companies to choose from. I know there are more companies now that are coming out, kind of similar to the Ottawa situation, where you had GoFundMe that was seizing the assets from the protesting truckers, and then you have Give Send Go that is a competitor to that. That's more of a Christian-based deal that doesn't seize assets of those that don't follow their ideology.
But they were targeted by hackers because they supported the truckers. And by
exactly
support,
right.
They mean the only way they support it is by making their platform available to them.
Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, and that same thing goes for what ended up happening with all leftists that say, hey, well, if you don't like Twitter and you don't like this and that, go start your own platform. Well, that's what Parler did. What happened to Parler? Yeah. They made the mistake of being on Amazon Web Services, and look what Amazon did to them.
But it wasn't just Amazon. They were pulled from the Google Play Store, and they were also pulled from
that's right.
the Apple Play Store. So
that's right.
It was a trifecta. It was all 3.
Yep. So you go start your own platform. Well, they go ahead and they go and do that, and then they end up getting shut down anyway, or getting hacked by activist hackers. It's a crazy world, man.
Yeah, it reminds me of a comic I saw the other day, where scientists have finally figured out how to create life. And they say, well, how'd you do it? Well, we took some dirt, and God's there going, well, you need to make your own dirt. Anyway, I guess that didn't come across as well, but
no, it's I think there needs to be more alternatives, because if this, and it just kind of seems like this social credit score system kind of is going into effect, whether we like it or not. There has to be alternatives, and it's been frustrating. You and I again talked about alternatives to this traditional social media, and I also want to next week talk about Section 230 and all that kind of stuff. But it's hard to get traction on these alternative sites as well. And Parler, I think theoretically, Parler was kind of ended in a sense when that happened. They were really gaining momentum, and then when they were pulled from AWS and pulled from those app stores, that was tough for them to recover. And you just don't get a lot of traction on those alternative sites. And because you have Twitter, YouTube, these companies were the first in, best dressed, and a lot of people just keep going to those platforms, and so traction is a difficulty.
The more that you have these secondary platforms for a specific, more conservative thought, more whatever, more freedom in it, they start being tactics for hackers, which again can be used for build social credit score. You may not know this, but like the American Frontline Doctors, conservative organization that was actually during the middle of COVID, they were one of the few organizations that were writing ivermectin and hydrochloroquine prescriptions. If you want to get it, they had a way to get it. So they had a telemedicine platform that they utilized, and they had an online pharmacy that they utilized. Both of those were breached in order to get at what their client base was and get a list of every single individual as part of that. What is that information used for? Excellent question. But it's also the same sort of information that you'd expect for a social credit score. You have these individuals that don't want to listen to what the government is telling you and how to handle COVID. They have their own ideas about it. And doctors are supposed to be able to make their own decisions, what they think is best for their customers. But anyone who goes through here are people who will not follow the mainstream idea on it. So let's find out who they are. Let's get a list of them.
Yeah, that's a whole different subject. Let me keep going on with this. But the bureaucrat wearing square glasses and a black checkered sweater shares the social credit department with 7 other employees on the second floor of the city hall. The system they have devised assigns 1,000 points at the beginning to each of Rongcheng's 740,000 adult residents. From there, the math begins. Get a traffic ticket, you lose 5 points. Earn a city-level award, such as committing a heroic act. Oops. Doing exemplary business or helping your family in unusual, tough circumstances, and your score gets boosted by 30 points. For a department-level award, you earn 5 points. This is like so childish. You can also earn credit by donating to charity or volunteering in the city's program. He stresses that anything that influences your points needs to be backed by official facts with official documents. That's all I need. I don't have enough to do in my life, but I have to start backing up every little thing that I do. So if I, help push somebody's car out of the road because it broke down, do I have to document that somehow? This is so ridiculous. He stresses that anything that influences your points needs to be backed by. That reduces subjectivity and limits penalties to mainly breaking laws and regulations. Depending on the score bracket, residents hold a grade rating ranging from A++ to D. They took away F for some reason. Some offenses can hurt the score pretty badly. For drunk driving, for example, one score plummets straight to a C. On the other hand, AAAs are awarded with perks such as being able to rent public bikes without paying a deposit and riding them for free for an hour and a half, receiving $50 heating discount every winter, and obtaining more advantageous terms on bank loans. I think I could read any more of that. But
yeah, on the surface, it sounds okay. But just as a reminder, in China, religion is outlawed and Christianity is outlawed. In fact, there was just recent a persecution where I think dozens of people were killed by the Chinese government because of their faith. So if you go to church, that's going to be another thing in here. And you can, I mean, I'm sure not everyone listening right now has faith in any given religion, but you can insert faith into whatever it is that you might want to think differently. It's no longer allowed. Whatever it is the government thinks is bad or is wrong, whether that's because you use too much carbon emissions or anything else.
And that's the biggest problem, is that it's government making those decisions for you. And I think we got a good glimpse of it in Canada with what happened in Ottawa and Trudeau. Trudeau, his statements of these small fringe minority having unacceptable views. I mean, think about that comment for a minute, that he's saying that a group of people have unacceptable views. So you didn't agree with him. You didn't agree with the government on what they're telling you. So because you don't like the fact that you're being tracked. That's really what it was about. It was about going back and forth of the border and having this tracking system on your phone. I don't know if you saw I posted the video. It was Tucker Carlson was interviewing. I don't know whether he was one of the organizers initially or what the story was, but his interview basically said, when I pull up to the border, and he was vaccinated, and he showed the border guy, Border Patrol, his phone. They said, "Oh, we don't need that." He said, "Well, why don't you need that?" He said, "Well, it already popped up on my screen." So the Border Patrol, these people already saw him coming because of whatever, I guess, the GPS or signal or whatever that was sent out by that app. So if you don't agree with that, you have an unacceptable view. So the government's decided at that point, then your credit score is automatically, your social credit score is automatically going to be low because you don't agree with the government.
So let's get this right. He had a vaccine passport.
Mm-hmm.
And as he pulled up, he already, the Border Patrol the vaccine passport already sent it to the Border Patrol.
Yep.
Without him doing anything.
Without him doing a thing.
Isn't that a violation of HIPAA?
I think, this whole thing from the very beginning, when people ask you questions about, all this stuff, is a violation of HIPAA. I'm surprised that this HIPAA stuff hasn't been brought up more frequently. But again, it's all become politicized and gone crazy. But regardless of whether it's a violation of HIPAA or not, Trudeau actually tried to sell this same technology to our administration in the United States, and I think it fell on deaf ears because maybe even our own liberal government thought it was crazy. But yeah, that's really primarily what the Ottawa protests were really about, was the tracking. I mean, think about how you can extrapolate that to not just vaccination status, but more things. This social credit score that we're talking about here. Oh, you're driving too much. Well, you're putting out too much carbon, so we're going to shut your car off. They're not going to let you drive your car.
So why is it that you think that there was a legislation in the United States about the IRS wanting a report of every single transaction of $600 or more? Why is that? Because it facilitates this. It allows this. You can now do tax incentives based on what you spend money on, or other things to implement the social credit score. What practical reason does the IRS need to know about every transaction of $600 or more? What? Zero. The only purpose is for stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, and my theory is, and I might be wrong, because again, I'm not one to talk in absolutes, but I just think that everything, when it comes to the social credit score system, when it comes to all of these lockdowns, when it comes to the control of the people, it's all about this carbon thing, this global warming issue, and why we have to, now that gas prices are, heading to $1 million a gallon, we'll just go out and buy an electric car. Yeah, I've got 60 to 90 grand laying around to go buy a Tesla. It's really, all of this stuff to me just seems to be revolving around really one thing, and that's this carbon footprint thing. I'm sure there's more to it than that.
But even that, I mean, it doesn't make any practical sense. Like I'm sure the Build Back Better plan. Mm-hmm. Part of that was put in charging stations all across the country.
Right.
Now, a logical way of looking at it is going, oh, this is great. We're going to have them every X number of miles on our interstates. Federal government, they're going to allow us to have interstate travel. from electric vehicles, because that's something right now is it's very difficult and with most ranges of most vehicles for you to drive from Maine to California with an electric vehicle.
Right.
It's because there aren't enough places in it. But that's not actually what it does. The Build Back Better plan actually puts charging stations in low-income neighborhoods, to make them available. So you're going, wait a second, electric vehicles are more expensive than gas vehicles, and you're going to put charging stations there in places where right now people can afford them. And I'm trying to remember exactly where it was I ran into this, but prior to the election, I read something that said that someone on Biden's staff wanted to get gas prices to $9 a gallon to drive everyone over to electric vehicles to make it forcing it. And so now we're seeing that happen. I wish I could find the article from back then. But in any case, who is it impacting? It impacts the low-income individuals the most because they can't afford the new gas prices.
Right.
They can't afford the electric vehicles. They can't even afford to charge everything up. So what does that force that means? The next step is going to be, well, we have to provide electric vehicles to them, right?
Yeah.
So now we're one step towards the communist, okay, vehicles are provided by the government standpoint.
Yeah.
Because there's no other logical way where this can answer. If you want everyone to go to electric vehicles and they're already more expensive, you either need to completely subsidize it from a government standpoint before the prices get driven down, or you need to literally give them to lower income people.
And these electric vehicles are subsidized already
significantly.
So I think I don't think it's a far-fetched to say that a lot of this stuff when it comes to these gas prices, I mean, if we can't drill domestically and we can't replace what we're losing domestically, and we're going to all these foreign countries to get oil, then what is that? What is the strategy here? The logical conclusion is, well, it's being done on purpose to drive up prices of gas in order to push everybody to go to electric vehicles. And that's why I think that a lot of this stuff has to do, it's all about the carbon footprint thing.
I mean, is it really about carbon? Or is that another one of the excuses like COVID? I mean, that's the part that I don't get, is that a lot of people who vote for the save the environment type stuff, you start taking a look at their personal actions and their personal behavior, and they don't live a low carbon footprint life. Because
I think it's arrogance. I think they don't have to, but you as a common peasant have to. I just think that
So
and
then
again,
it's about control. It's not about protecting the environment. It's about control. If you're not going to apply the same rules to you as anybody else, then it's about control. It's not about the environment. If you're diehard about the environment, all about carbon footprint, and you yourself have almost zero carbon footprint, I respect you immensely. I mean, I agree with you on principles, I respect you immensely, but I have no respect for these politicians trying to put through these policies where they don't change their life in any shape to try to be consistent with how they're voting.
No, especially when you have Barack Obama, complaining about climate change and seas rising, yet he has what is it, a $40 million mansion on the ocean. He's just built a new multi-million-dollar mansion in Hawaii.
Or better yet, what was it? The Biden administration went to the UN to talk about climate change and the importance of climate change, and had an entourage of, what was it, like 60 cars? It was some ridiculous entourage of cars because they brought so many people with them. And rather than rent a bus or something, obviously you're not going to put the president in a bus. I'm not suggesting that, but some of his other staff could have been. If you really cared about the environment, why would you drive such a long train of cars to get there?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think maybe it is that they're just using the whole carbon thing, and it is ultimately about control. It always defaults to that. Yeah. But yeah, I think they noticed that during all the lockdowns, one of the things that was said was the carbon emissions went down significantly as a result of all the lockdowns, and so whatever they can use to try and control society is, I guess they're going to try and use it. But yeah, it's completely nonsensical, Doug. Paul Diolito, government is now the enemy of the people. Electric cars are about control.
And just because I actually like electric cars, the acceleration on them are ridiculous. I love the fact they're quiet. So it's a technology I'd love to see progress, but it's not a technology I want shoved down my throat as a requirement, nor do I think it's good for our country or economy for it to be forced in that way.
Well, the other thing too is that what does it take to charge these electric cars? I mean, you have electricity, and electricity comes from where? I mean, are you still not burning fossil fuels? Are you still not, in order to generate electricity, you know, and then plus on top of that, what you have to make the batteries out of, the components for the batteries.
I
Is
mean,
that
from an environmental impact, that's a much bigger deal. I mean, from an energy standpoint, you can say that even if you're burning fossil fuels, it's more efficient because you're doing it in mass, and therefore the imprint is less. But the batteries, I mean, what's involved in the batteries and disposal and the recycling,
right?
And that is a huge problem.
Yeah.
There's actually a graveyard of electronic vehicles in France where they have like hundreds of electronic vehicles that when the batteries basically were no longer useful, they just park them. What are you going to do with them? I mean, and they're horrible for the environment after they're disposed of. They need to be properly recycled.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Got about three minutes or so left. So any other questions from anyone in the chat before we roll out of here? Or any other topics that you guys want us to talk about next week? Read this one. What is this? The gunman? Paper and pencil. Paper and pencil and ID is all we need. Nothing wrong with old school way.
Yeah,
I agree.
Why is it that people think that supply an ID is racist? I mean, every form of government, anything requires you to identify yourself. You should have to identify yourself to vote. It's a simple thing. That's the one of the things I've never understood why getting an ID is racist. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, it was also contradictory. I mean, if you initially were requiring everybody go around carrying a passport to show proof of vaccination, that had to be matched up with an ID. So, I mean, it's comical. It's a comedy show. So they're saying, "Oh, you have to have your ID if you're going to do this, that, and the other thing." But when it comes to voting, that's a problem. I mean,
the only thing that ID prevents or could prevent, it doesn't even prevent everywhere, is illegal immigrants from voting. Or you won't have an ID if you're an illegal immigrant. Right. Anyone else, go home, get your ID. And I'm even for like the government. If you don't have a driver's license, they can't be combined together. By all means, let's do a photo ID that's for voting that you can get, and even have it be paid for by the government. That's a good. Let's not let whatever the fee is for the things hold anyone else from getting it. But still, you got to have ID, and it's reasonable.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. One last comment, and we'll. I'm being told I have comments on Rumble, and they're not showing up on this thing, so I didn't do it right.
Oh man, we'll get it right next time.
Tibor, it was a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you, Tibor. Thank you for being here. I hope I'm getting that name right, and I apologize to those that are on Rumble that I don't have your comments on here. I am not happy about that, and I'll figure out why. There's not a actually, you know what? Hang on, Doug. You don't have to be anywhere, right? You have to be somewhere.
Be anywhere. No, not at all.
All right. Let me.
I didn't know how long we're going. I blocked off the whole day. We can talk for hours. That was kind of ironic. I mean, it makes sense. I think our conversation last night was even better than what we had live.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I knew it was going to be ruined because it was so good last night.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Do you now have the Rumble comments?
Yeah, I found them. Super buff. I don't think I want to read this, guys. Oh wait, let me start from the beginning here. Okay, so yeah, Furo Cactus. Does Doug have any comments about the recent router Splunk log report? Well, you went into that earlier.
I did. Political theater. It did not show anything.
Yep. Scooter Lee, Doug, you are a shining light. I agree. Gene YK, can he talk about his conversation with AG Mark Brnovich?
I can tell you that I've spent somewhere close to 8 hours, about 3 meetings talking to them. But since it's an ongoing investigation, like a lot of other people, I wouldn't, if I was them, I wouldn't want me talking about it. So I'm not going to give any details on it.
Okay.
But I have met with them. I have talked with them. They're doing in-depth investigation. I was really confident it'd be something positive. After the SHADEG report, I'm a little more concerned about it. But at the end of the day, God's in control, and it's his job, not mine, to do something about that.
Okay.
So.
I hear you. Pharaoh Cactus, is Ben Cotton still under an NDA? Can he make a public comment? And is he completely done sharing info with the Senate and Brnovich?
So our NDAs expired when our report was issued. So Ben Cotton can talk as much as he wants to. He's not a really out there guy, so he doesn't look for it. I mean, both he and I, we're not really looking for the media attention. Like, I show up on these when friends ask me or other stuff, but I'm not like seeking to be out there talking about stuff.
No,
and Ben Cotton is even more quiet. So yes, he can say things, and I know he's shared information with the AG. I actually don't know the specifics on how much he's met or talked with him, but I know he has as well.
Imbu, do you think things are going to get worse? I think it's a legitimate question to ask.
You know, when I pray about how to prepare for the future, I feel like the Lord continues to say to be more self-sufficient, be able to supply my own food, be able to supply my own stuff. And most of the Christians I know have that same exact reaction right now. And so I don't have a timetable and I can't predict the future. But yes, I think things in our country are likely to get worse. And it could easily be tied to these things we talked about today.
Super Buff Chef says, I'm guessing they're waiting to see if the or Arizona AG will do anything about it. That and so much more.
And you know, I've said this publicly a few times, but I'd encourage everyone to put positive pressure on the AG to get a report out and to issue a report with substance. You know, that was one of the things about the SHADEG report is there's almost no substance to it. But if they're going to say that, hey, we looked into the claim that XYZ, they should say, and this is what we did, and we validated it. It was not correct because of XYZ. Let's get some hard evidence out there. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm hopeful to do that for almost everything that's come to them so they can put people at ease that a proper investigation was done. I'm not afraid about anything in our audit being wrong in any way. If it's wrong, I want it to be found. We put a lot of effort and time into investigating these things, and we have hard data we base things on. But it doesn't mean that there was other things we didn't know about. And so I'm hopeful the AG gives that type of report. And I'm hopeful that's why it's taken so long, because it takes a long time to write that type of report that really fully gives the evidence people have confidence in it.
Super Buff Chef said, Doug is a good guy. I too was mad at him before, but there are things going on we pissants don't know. LOL. I just hope it all works out right. And that's what I was trying to say. I've known Doug for a long time, and it's really frustrating to watch someone you know personally go through the attacks before anything even began, before any of this stuff started, regardless of what side you're on. I know Doug enough to where his whole thing is to find. He was hired to do a job to go out and look and see if there were any issues and report the findings. But people wanted to make him out immediately because of I don't know, some Twitter post or something you made. That was one thing they kept hanging
Yeah, did you
on.
know that everything, all this negative press and everything came down to 4 Twitter posts?
Yeah.
Okay, one of which was a Twitter post I reposted from Marco Rubio, where he said that the Venezuelan elections were rigged and based on stuff. And one of the things I looked at is I actually had a statistician who, what was it, about 2002, 2004, he actually got an article published in a mathematical journal, a prestigious mathematical journal, doing an analysis of Venezuela, showing how the election had been rigged. And he told me, say, look, Doug, I did the same analysis in this last election cycle, and I found the same pattern. And that was part of the stuff that I said, danger, danger, this needs to be looked into. Maybe there's some other explanation to it, but this is an anomaly that requires an investigation. In any case, so. Yeah. Sorry. So what was the question? I'm sorry.
No, it was just one person. He ended up having to leave. And again, guys on Rumble, I apologize. I didn't think that this is the first time I actually did a live broadcast on Rumble. So that's my fault. I won't make that same mistake. I thought it was going to come through the software system I have, but it's only YouTube comments that I was reading. So it's actually nice to see the amount of people that are on the Rumble side. Now, basically, all he was saying is that I guess he was pissed off at you at first, but again, once they get to know you and who you are, and the type of person that you are, there were. I don't know if you ever watched Tim Pool, but Tim Pool had Marjorie Taylor Greene on, and a lot of people were just angry with based on what they've read about Marjorie Taylor Greene, had no idea what her actual personality was like.
Yeah.
And once she was on Tim Pool, people were like, "Oh, I had no idea she was such a nice person and down to earth and whatever."
And she's authentic. And that's the thing everyone's looking for in politicians, is they're authentic.
And that's what we need more of.
I don't have to agree with you on everything. If you're authentic, like, we're good.
Yeah.
You have to agree with you on a lot of major things, but like, if you're authentic, we can disagree on other things.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that she was talking about exposing was the voting process, how and Tim Pool took a lot of he was getting swatted. All kinds of things were happening really after she was on. And that's the thing that's just so disgusting what people will do. And it's not the right that's doing that kind of stuff, ladies and gentlemen, doing the swatting and stuff like that. But she was exposing the voting process where people weren't even showing up, I guess, or identifying who they were when they were voting on certain things. So she would actually, I guess, call the vote or do something in particular where everybody had to either show up or call. There was an identification process or something. And a lot of people, a lot of other politicians were angry with her because, she called them out and said, "Hey, we're going to vote on this stuff. Everybody needs to be held accountable." And so, but there were, I guess the point I'm trying to make is a lot of people they had a misconception of the type of person that she was. And until she was on Tim Pool and they actually heard her speak and listened to her, they completely changed their mind about who she was.
Yeah. And I would say that that's probably one of the most important things. I mean, I'm sure you've heard before that we were in the information age before. I think we're in the disinformation age right now. And you need to understand that most of what's circulating out there is not true and not valid. Mm-hmm. And you need to go to the primary source. So when you hear something about an audit report, go read the report yourself. When you hear something about this, go see it yourself and go see what they actually said, the actual video. The difficult thing is here, as we were talking yesterday, is that deep fakes are becoming more common. You guys may not know this, but Russians actually compromised a news agency in Ukraine. They put up a deep fake of Zelensky saying, "Hey, you need to surrender and turn over your weapons. The war is over." And they broadcast that on this news station. And what a deep fake, for those of you who don't know, it's basically they take an existing video of me, say, talking, and they can now with a computer make it look like I said something different, and with the audio, like I said something different. So it sounded like Zelensky saying these things. And a lot of the military actually complied with this and actually laid out the weapons and surrendered until they actually found out and took it down and took care of it. So it was a deep fake. And so we're not even necessarily going to be able to believe what we hear and see in the future unless you were in person. And the Bible talks about this, that at the end of days, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. And like, this is the source of it's talking about. But as long as we still can, go to the primary source.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Edison's back. Let me show his comment real quick. I'm sure he's enjoying every bit about this, but it's fun. It's just funny. Listen to this guy. MTG's a nut job. Your assessment of her says everything I need to know. Listen to what she says. I did listen to what she said. I think the nut job is you. And that'll be the last time I even read another one from this guy.
Not everyone's going to agree with everyone, but if she's authentic, that's good.
Yeah. But unbelievable. Gene YK, what is the call-in number? We don't have a call-in number, Gene. If you have a question, type it into the chat. What do I look like?
I'm Thomas Jefferson. I'm honored that you stuck with us so long.
I know. No, he was waiting in the weeds.
Obviously, there's something interesting in all this. I mean, I'm still blown away that people are still writing articles about me. I'm like, really, I'm not that interested. I'm pretty boring.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I'm just kidding. It is weird just it was like reading these comments. I'm like, or these articles. But it just goes to show you the machine that's involved. And these aren't, and what's really sad is that it's not journalism's been,
it's dead.
It died a long time ago. And, you see, if you ever watch, the Jen Psaki, things, and you look at the people that are in the crowd, they're brain dead. I mean, they just look like there's just no soul in any of them.
You know what's funny about their field is that when you and I were kids, it used to be that being a reporter was a prestigious career.
Yeah.
Right. They were looked up to. Everyone valued their opinion. They wanted to have to say. And now, like, their trustworthiness is below that of a used car salesman.
Yeah.
And the irony of it is the media mostly thinks that it's everybody else's fault that happened. And they don't see that it's actually their own biased actions. I can't tell you the number of times, like, I guess I haven't talked to the media that much, but several times I've been like, hey, this is extremely biased. They're like, what do you mean it's biased? I'm objective. I'm like, what about this statement? Do you not know what the word objective means? They 100% legitimately think they're being objective.
Yeah. Just ran to read the facts. Wow, Doug and crew, glad to see you looking good. Something Wong won. Wow, Doug and crew, glad to see you looking good. Imbu, some Christians are extremely interesting.
I don't know what that means.
One vote, one person. MSM only reports on what the government wants them to report. I think a lot of these journalists were they're chosen to be, in that field now to follow what they're told by mostly these oligarchs and government and things like that. Like I've said, I think a lot of it's by design. I think there are some journalists that believe that they're being objective because they're just not that bright.
You know what CNN stands for, right?
Well, there's a few different ones. Clinton News Network, Communist News Network. Which one?
Communist News Network's my favorite.
Your favorite one?
I think it's appropriate.
But what's also happening too with CNN is, and you can see what's happening to them. You've seen the reports that they've lost the vast majority, probably close to 90% or so of their viewership, because people are seeing right through them. Look at all the scandals that CNN has. With the child stuff, and now the sexual stuff with and the Cuomo brothers. I mean this is supposed to be a news network, and it's like a soap opera. Actually, worse than that, it's like a reality show, like the worst reality show that's going on. And I think the sad part is that you have like Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, others that are on YouTube, but they get silenced because I think there's pressure being put on by MSNBC, CNN to try and silence independent people like us who are trying to talk about news that we think is relevant, and then people that are listening to us think is relevant, and are getting shut down because they're losing revenue. And so that's why it's frustrating. But at least, when I said not getting a ton of traction on these alternative sources, but today, this is pretty good. Let me read a few more from Rumble here.
I mean, some of that's probably because it did blast to my Telegram. I know my Telegram is pretty heavy on.
All right, so
Rumble,
something wrong, Dennis. How can we help Doug? I know about Strawtech Go Fund, but how is Doug's family? I talked about. I think we should do a give, send, go to help with legal fees or whatever. That's your, ultimately your decision on what you want to do or not. But
yeah, I'm getting to the point, with this transition where I might be open to that idea. I mean, from a biblical standpoint, I don't feel like I can just not pay back debts. So the debts that I have from the audit, I feel like I need to pay. And so the Bible is very clear that if you owe money, you are a slave to the lender. And so I have a high priority to pay back everyone that Cyber Ninjas owes monies to. And that's why I've legitimately pushed everyone to StratTech. But at that point, I was still earning an income, and I really don't know what the future is in store for me. So I might be open to that idea. We'll see.
What is StrawTech?
StratTech is one of the companies that helped us in the Arizona audit.
Oh, okay.
They originally came in to just do IT work for us, to set up the network, because we had the network of a large company in order to run all the data we had. We ended up with almost 2 petabytes of data, as an example, that's what's above a terabyte. So when you're talking about 1,000 terabytes, that's what you get into petabytes. And we had 2 of those. But when we had hit a point where one of our original subcontractors, it was not working out, and we needed to do things, we actually moved all the people and all the management all over to StratTech. And so they really served for all 2,000 people involved in the audit. From after the 3rd week, they all went through StratTech, and they increased their role. So they were huge and pivotal to them. And they're currently, I owe them, I think it's $660,000 is what the Gifts and Go is at. I think actually needs to be knocked down a little bit more, because I was able to take more money from subjects to them. But they're not in the best financial shape right now. They're getting canceled just like I was canceled. They have cash flow issues because of all the money that I owe them. And so I'd really love to see people, donate money there. So barring until I have anything else to help me out personally, if their company fails too, I'm going to feel atrocious. I feel like when I signed up for this work, I knew I was doing a risky thing.
Right.
I thought it was all covered. I had individuals who said that they would cover whatever the cost was of the audit, no matter what. And obviously they didn't come through, and there's some misunderstanding in that. But when I brought in a company like StratTech, we're like, hey, we need some IT. This is what we're doing. Yes, I'm fundraising it. I don't expect it to be an issue, but they weren't seeing the risk. And
Right.
so for them to be taken out over this work is really, really wrong to me. And so I would say first and foremost to do so. And if you're wondering where and how to give money, if you go to cyberninjas.com, I've got a letter up there, basically a farewell letter. It's got our financials, and what we did from the audit. I'm hoping to update that, as I mentioned earlier, again. But it also links to the Gifts and Goes. It also talks about Jesus. If you're nervous in these times, you need a relationship with Christ. I've got more information on my website. So.
Okay. Cactus, Doug, what have you been after what you've been through? Do you think other auditors will have the courage to step up to the plate and conduct future audits? It's probably a tough question to answer. I mean, you can't put yourself in somebody else's head.
What I can tell you is the work that we did in Arizona is what inspired a lot of things that's going on in other states. And it encouraged them that, yes, it's worth it. I've had people say that, what I did inspired them. And these individuals, I mean, all the media is constantly portraying this out, that there's this group of individuals that what was it? A recent reporter told me there's this coalition that came together to try to overthrow the 2020 election results. What happened is there was a group of individuals that said something doesn't look right, doesn't smell right. And every time we try to look into it in any which way, they don't do it. We find out, I have a friend who works for DHS. 6 states asked for things to be looked into this election. They were all shut down. The investigations never happened. And we're saying something needs to happen. Let's get to the bottom of it. We have faith in God and faith in Christ, and we want to find the truth, and let's do that. And so that's what happened, is these independent groups that for the most part don't trust each other. I mean, that's the crazy thing, is we all think the right is one unity. They don't trust each other. They think other people are deep state, CIA. They're not sure. And legitimately, there's been enough backstabbing and problems happening that it's understandable that the trust issues happen. But it's really a shame, because if we could all work together in a cohesive manner and fight this fake news that's out, this is fake narrative, everyone would be in good shape. But it's not what people, that's not what people want.
People are picking sides.
And like individuals that remain nameless, like have trying to build their own audit companies now and trying to establish themselves as leaders. And they figured the best way to do so is to attack attack what we did and try to say that we're incompetent or bad in the process as well. And it's just, no, what I was hoping out of this audit is, I didn't do it to try to start an audit company. I didn't do it to try to make any money. And obviously I wasn't successful if I was trying to make any money. But when I get to know, I was praying about it, is I would love to see 40 audit companies start up across the country, be a localized competitive market with competitive ideas and different ways of doing things, and make our election system a system of audits tied with it, where it's a normal process, where it continuously gets things better. That's what I want to see. That's what makes our government better. I want all political beliefs mixed into that. I want people with integrity involved in it. And if you're out there trying to start a company to do that, and you've got, the chutzpah, the stay-to-itiveness, the stubbornness to actually try to do an audit company in it, if there's a way I can help you, I can. I will say that my flexibility is greatly decreased right now because of everything that's going on. But I want to see you succeed. And I want you to do it your way with your unique ideas, and hopefully build across with the information I've learned over the time of what I've done.
Imbu, maybe Doug can start a web hosting company.
There's thousands of those.
Yeah, that's a pretty competitive market. Paul DeLuto, MTG, and Bobert are the new breed of fighting women, and I welcome them. It's kind of what you were saying earlier, Doug, is, those kind of outsiders are what we need more of in our government, kind of calling out what's happening. And
authentic, their walk matches their talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to. I don't have to agree on everything, but if your walk matches your talk, and that's the thing, is that for too long in our country, we have elected politicians that don't say anything we disagree with. And as a result, they don't say much of anything. Like, they don't really take hard of a stance on anything. And that's what we've got. We've got a lot of spineless individuals who don't have much opinion in anything because that's how they got elected. Now, if we want to change the way our country is, we have to change the way we elect people. We have to elect the people that are going to stand for principle and for what's right. And by all means, they need to mostly agree with what we agree with. But we need to be willing to say, I don't agree with a third of their platform, but they've got the important things, so I'm going to vote for them because I know they're authentic and they're going to do what they say they were going to do.
Yeah. Andrew, they have an agenda and they'll stand on anyone to get there.
I want to comment a little bit about that. There's this idea that there's this they, and there is the World Economic Forum, and I think legitimately they're trying to create unity over making some change. But there's also, I think it's Isaiah 8:12 that says, "Do not call conspiracy everything people are calling conspiracy." And you look at the context, and I was reading in the context of the Isaiah at the time, let's see what's going on. And it's basically what's going on here is there's all these factions of people. No one knows who to trust. No one knows who to believe. And so they're automatically assuming conspiracies across everything. And those conspiracies are on all sides. They say that looking into the election is a conspiracy theory, but they also say there's a conspiracy theory that I was purposely trying to, make Trump win with the audit, or I was colluding with Trump. I've never talked to him. I'd love to meet him. I'd love to talk to him. I never have. I'm hoping someday I'll be able to. But there's everything. And like, I know of instances, like for example, at one point in time, just my wife had a baby in November. Okay. And in that time period, for about 2 weeks before the baby was born, we're actually in and out of the hospital with my wife being checked. Some things weren't right. It wasn't a good situation. In that time period, I was not very responsive to people. And there's a whole slew of conspiracy theories that spun around the fact that I was taking care of my wife in the hospital. And I can't tell you the number of times that same thing has happened. Like, I'll sit there and I'm willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt, and I'll be like, hey, maybe they just got something going on in life. I'm not going to automatically assume that something bad happened. And sure enough, I found out later, they just found out they had cancer. They just, whatever. There's some other reason went on, but people jump to without information, people jump to conclusions. But I can tell you that if I tried to stay on top of the fake news that was being told about me, I would not have ever done anything else. Like, absolutely, it's impossible. So like, I can't be communicative enough to deal with all the situations. Whereas the more I talk out there, the more people are like, hey, maybe Doug's a nice guy. Maybe this conspiracy I thought about him isn't real, which is, that's reality. But in silence, people make up things.
Yeah. All right, guys, we need to wrap this up. We've been almost 2 hours. So hopefully, Lee, I know on Rumble for sure they want you back. A lot of the questions were just related to you. They didn't give a damn about me.
Those are probably the people from my Telegram, most likely.
Okay. All right.
But I don't know. You said you had 60,000 people watching, and I have a measly following, I think, of 6,000 on Telegram. I am the real Doug Logan, because there is a fake Doug Logan on Telegram. If people want
is that really?
But I will tell you that at least at this point in time, I almost never post. A very, very lightweight. But hey, I'm not going to be bombarded with stuff, but that may change.
Well, the plan, the plan is like I've told people before. This was originally a tennis channel of all things, and it's funny because I'll get some people that are still will ask us, like, are you going to be teaching tennis lessons anymore? I'm like, no, I've switched. I've gone to politics, baby. And so what set me off, I don't know if I even told you this or not, but everything that was happening to Novak Djokovic in Australia, and by the way, it was happening in the United States as well. He hasn't been able to come to the United States to play because of the CDC has blocked him because of his vax status. And so, I decided, hey, I want to talk about some things, and next thing you know, he went from 18,000 to, I don't know, or approaching 50,000 subscribers. And again, Doug and I, for those of you who are maybe weren't here in the beginning, have talked about doing a podcast for a very long time, more specifically about data breach stuff and things that you were actually involved in. Yeah, and insurance. Like, yeah, you really want to listen to that?
If you had told me back then that we're going to do a podcast on politics, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know anything about that.
Well, and on top of that, now I'm laughing that we even talked about talking about insurance and cyber stuff. How ridiculously boring would that be?
We'd have 2 subscribers if we were talking about that.
Yeah, we would have. Yeah, we would have no one watching. So Pharaoh Cactus, yes, please have Doug back. And we watch his Telegram and others. That's Pharaoh Cactus. Something Wong, I'm catching the end, but we'll watch soon again. Thanks for all the hard work. And all of you, if you wouldn't mind, Pharaoh Cactus, good move, Dennis, from tennis to politics. I just subscribed. Well, thank you. I'm glad you approve. That's good positive feedback. I need that. But please help at least for us, because I am going to have Doug on more frequently, as much as he wants to come on. It is helpful having somebody. Doug is a very smart guy, and knows a lot of stuff, and it is helpful to be able to kind of talk about certain subjects and not have another person on that can share his perspective. And so, and we are doing what we've been talking about for a long time. I've been doing this by myself now for a couple of months. It's grown significantly, but I want to grow it even more. and having Doug on, I think we can definitely do that. So we want one more comment. They will tell you whatever you want to hear so they can get whatever they want. Then do the opposite. I think most of us know better what the truth is. Thanks, Anthony. But yeah, we do know. We do know better, and that's the point. I think we have a lot of university professors and those that call themselves elitists that think they know better than the rest of us. They think that they can tell us what to do because they're university professors. And like I've said, I've gone through a lot of college, and those who cannot do teach. And they are professors for a reason. Not all, but a very large majority of them. And you have Klaus Schwab and others that are part of the World Economic Forum and Davos and everything else try to tell you what to do. Sorry. They don't know better. They just don't. And so what I want to do here is, gain more, at least do our part, do my part to have a different perspective and not talk like certain people from an absolute standpoint that we're right. This actually happened. This is, what we believe, what we can prove and can't prove, and then have people's opinions, but not take one crazy psychotic side or the other. Kind of discuss it from the middle, because we just don't. There's really none of that anymore. One vote, one person. Thanks, Doug. Did your best against the corruption. Appreciate you. Imbu, elites are the new gods. I hate even using the word elites because they give themselves that name, elite. The college professor, I can't remember her name, was actually saying, the reason people have a problem with us elites is, something or other. I'm like, you actually called yourself that? You're a university professor. I mean, what is that? I mean, all right, Bill Gates wants to call himself an elite because he's a multi-billionaire and started a company. Okay, I'll give you that, even though you're not. But a university professor at a World Economic Forum thing, and
you think politics are bad? Try working at a university.
Oh my God. I could never go back to college now when I see what I see. I don't know how people do it. I really don't. All right. Well, we'll have you back. And that was fun. I appreciate you being on, Doug.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for all of you that put in your comments. And please do us a favor, support us. You can go on, you see the thing scrolling down on the bottom. Those of you that are on YouTube, DennisH.net. DennisH.net is PayPal. You can make a donation there. We have a Cash App. The username is Hendrickson Dennis. But at least you can go to PayPal there and give us a donation to help support our work so we can continue to do this. It does cost money to run this equipment. It does cost money for the camera equipment, the computer equipment, doing the software that's needed to do the broadcasting and all that stuff. So we definitely would appreciate that support. Super chats as well. And I think there's something on Rumble here. I see a little cash bag. I don't know what that's all about, but somebody might want to be able to test that out and let me know. Thanks, Paul. Good job, guys. I look forward to the future live shows. We're going to at least do every Sunday. Doug, you're good with that, Sunday at 2 o'clock. So we're going to be doing that on a regular basis. If there's any sort of issues, obviously we'll let you know. And I'm having so much fun doing this. I'd like to do it more frequently. Maybe not every night, but we can definitely do it more frequently because there's constantly stuff going on. But please help us out, support us. Super chats, DennisH.net for PayPal, and then also Substack, where Doug and I off this are going to be creating other content, and that's at Substack, which is DennisHendrickson.substack.com. And you can subscribe there. We'll have some free stuff and then stuff behind the paywall, but you can go in and sign up right now at DennisHendrickson.substack.com. And yeah, Embu, we do have day jobs.
I'm losing mine.
Yeah. Doug might not. I do.
It's okay. God's still in control.
But yeah, this is stuff that, again, we can do. Yeah, we can do, we're obviously doing on Sunday because we actually enjoy it. That's my hobby. And used to play tennis all the time.
Yeah,
I don't do that much anymore.
I would say if there's specific questions you have for me, especially with the audit or anything, happy to answer them. I'm not afraid of difficult questions. So we can go into that. I don't know if that opens up a can of worms. And if you run an audit company and you want to do a certified financial audit on Cyber Ninjas, Maricopa County stuff, find some way to get in touch with us. I'd love to have certified financials with the work that we did. I just don't have the money to pay for it. And I think that would set a lot of people at ease as to where and how the money was spent. So I'm just going to throw that out there in case there's someone out there watching who has connections.
That's actually a good point. So as opposed to, just donating money for Doug to help those of you who want to help Doug out, services, if there's anybody that can do that, what did you say, forensic accounting or whatever it is?
Yeah, if they're an accounting firm that can do certified financial statements. I want people just to be able to know, because someone else, third party, signed their name on that this is where money was spent. This was how it was spent. And so when we do that report, people aren't things there. I mean, there's conspiracy theories that I pocketed the $5 million and live in some high life. And I'm like, really?
Yeah, I can assure you that's not happening. I can assure you that. And it's sad because, like I said, from the very beginning, you were just attacked by the press, not even knowing anything about you, just attacked. And it's really sad. But all right, everybody, we'll see you at least on Sunday next week. And thanks for coming out, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll see you all later.
Good to see you.